Welcome back. I'm your host, Chris Grenham, and with me, as always, founder, CEO of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso. Nick, what's going on, man?
What's up, Chris? Lots going on, man. Lots going on.
Lots going
Great guest
on
today. It's fitting guest.
Keith Smith was the perfect guest to have on today. We talked a little Jimmy Butler. We talked some salary cap because that's Keith's mojo. If you got salary cap questions, he's your guy. So we talked some Jabari Bird salary questions. We talked cap projections going forward, and obviously Jimmy Butler. But Jimmy Butler is the relevant topic right now in the league, man. It was kind of perfect timing. We were dragging out this final week until training camp and preseason, and Jimmy Butler asking for a trade from Minnesota was the perfect segue just to take us home for the rest of the offseason. So, pretty messy situation. It's been messy there for the last year, but now it's kind of hit its peak here. So what are your, obviously it doesn't directly impact the Celtics, but what are your Jimmy Butler thoughts here?
Well, I read Keith Smith's article on Celtics blog, and as usual, really good. It makes sense, tears it down, breaks it apart really well. But, I mean, are we going to have to hear this all year? Because, of course, this relates to Kyrie, right?
Exactly.
And Jimmy Butler, I mean, there's no rumors for him going to the Celtics, and I'm glad, because after covering that Bulls Celtics series a couple years back where he just kind of quit,
right,
I have no interest in Jimmy Butler. I don't know why Kyrie would want to play with him in the first place. I like the way Keith brought in the Clippers situation. Thought that was super interesting. Check it out on Celtics blog. And to me, I mean, if I'm Tibbs, you got to get rid of him. He's going to walk, right?
Right.
I just don't understand why Kyrie or Butler would want to go to the New York Knicks, the most overrated franchise in sports history.
You love the Knicks. You love the Knicks.
I cannot stand the Knicks because I cannot stand the hype they get because they haven't won a championship in 50 years, and even then, it was like Russell had to retire for them to win. And then there's the Nets. Like, I might as well just still be in New Jersey. Like, I don't know what kind of thoughts are going through these guys' heads.
Yeah, it's an interesting list. Obviously, the appeal for Butler is the max cap space for those three teams going into next offseason. And you look at the Clippers, and again, I mentioned them in last week's episode. That's, has always been my opinion on if Kawhi doesn't stay in Toronto, I think he's going to end up with the Clippers. So, of course, that possibility with two max cap, options there in LA, that's an appealing thing to him. But Keith, again, we'll talk about it in our interview with him later on in the show, but he brought in the interesting aspect of how even the Clippers, has to do with the Celtics and impacts the Celtics draft picks moving forward. So it's interesting, but it's messy, man.
It's messy, and again, it's going to go on pretty much all season long until Kyrie basically says, I'm not going anywhere, which isn't going to be until the offseason next year. And
I tweeted it the other day. I am, 3 weeks into this season, I'm going to be so sick of hearing these Kyrie rumors and Kyrie speculation. It's going
to be great for ratings and clicks.
Oh,
but
totally.
At the same time, as a reporter, it's just so boring to have to discuss the same thing over and over. And all I can say about the entire situation is Boston is not. If that he's going to trade him.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
wherever Jimmy Butler goes, wherever Joe Schmo goes, where Uncle Drew, wherever Kyrie wants, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, anyway. If Kyrie wants to go, let him go. We don't need him. The Celtics don't need him.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I'm more interested at the moment right now in the whole Jimmy Butler situation with if they're going to trade him, because obviously Tom Thibodeau is a pretty stubborn guy. He's a hard-nosed dude, and that's just his way. That's his mantra. And he's saying, I'd basically rather walk. There was a report yesterday, I'd rather walk than give him up for picks and rebuild this team. And I don't know, you can't really, these relationships, when they go south like this, they rarely turn around. So, I think they're going to have to bail on him, and my real hope out of all of this for the near future. Yes, Clippers for sure, but in the really near future is that Jimmy Butler has to show up at Timberwolves Media Day on Monday and take a picture next to Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns, and Twitter just explodes. That is my immediate hope. But
that's great, Chris.
For a basketball situation, I agree with you. Clippers, you got to root for the Clippers, and obviously, like Keith elaborates later in the show, if the Clippers succeed and play well and make the playoffs over the next year, it's good for the Celtics. So, got to root for them.
Before we go to Keith,
just
let me whine for 1 second. I'm just getting so sick of how the players control this league. Between Kawhi and now Jimmy Butler, I love that Tibbs says let him walk. Because you know what? He's putting his foot down.
It's that old school mentality.
It may not be the best business decision.
It's that but
there's got to be.
It's the old school mentality, which is it's crazy that suddenly that is an abstract move by him, but it is, like you said, it's a really players driven league.
It's a players driven league, and you know what? They're running wild with it.
They are. They are. As they should. If I was a player, I would do the same thing.
I don't know. You have to look at. I guess it's easy for me to say I'm not in the situation, but you have to look at the health of the league as a whole, and the league in itself is kind of really struggling with the off-balance conferences and player and teams. Now players like the Kawhi Leonard thing, no one has ever wanted to leave Greg Popovich.
Yeah,
ever.
I know. That's a weird thing, but I think in terms, the conference imbalance is an interesting thing, but in terms of the league as a whole, I think a lot of people would argue that this players-driven mentality is actually part of the reason why the NBA has been so successful over years past, because there's a good relationship in terms of the players having a say, whereas in the NFL, they just kind of shut their mouths and it's the shut up and dribble kind of thing. So I think
there's got to be an even medium somewhere, though.
Right. There's finding that even medium is important, and I get a lot of people understand that. But man, it does make for some interesting off seasons and some interesting stories here. So we'll jump in with Keith here and get into Jimmy Butler and how he impacts Boston, and let's jump to it. And now we welcome in Keith Smith of Celtics Blog and Real GM. Keith, how's it going, man?
It's going well, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm good. So last time we were together, we were at the Thomas and Mack Center at UNLV watching an unhealthy amount of basketball. And now that we've regained our sanity and summer's coming to a close here, we've got training camp less than a week away, preseason 1 week away. We made it. We're here.
Oh, man, yeah, I know. It seemed like in the beginning of July when we were together out there in Vegas, like it was never going to get here, and then it just dragged through, end of July and into August. But here we are a week out, and, couldn't be more excited to see the Celtics team fully healthy on the floor together.
Exactly, yeah. Everyone's looking forward to that, and as Brad Stevens said yesterday, it looks like everyone's going to be a full go going into training camp, so that's great. But in other NBA news recently, you wrote a piece on it this morning on Celtics Blog. We have the whole Jimmy Butler requesting a trade from Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota, it hasn't really been a very pretty situation in that locker room for about a year now. Whether it's Karl Anthony Towns against Butler or Butler having issues with Wiggins or Thibodeau with the locker room, regardless, it just hasn't been very pretty. And so obviously, Thibodeau and Butler met the other day in LA, and Jimmy Butler officially requested a trade with his 3-team list being the Clippers, the Nets, and the Knicks. So obviously that doesn't directly have to do with Boston and with the Celtics, but in your piece this morning, you kind of laid out how it does impact Boston and, in what form it does, more specifically with Kyrie. So in your opinion, really, how does this touch upon the Celtics, and what should Celtics fans really be paying attention for here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be something that Celtics fans are going to want to watch. And I want to start off with, no, the Celtics are not going to trade for Jimmy Butler. Mm-hmm. Unless the Wolves all of a sudden have a healthy desire to take Shane Larkin in some massive sign and trade to be the salary match, which is not going to happen. So really what's important that people understand here with the Celtics connections are there's really two parts to this. So the first is the Knicks and the Nets part. So it's really you're doing some connecting of the dots here, but these are not hard dots to connect, because what you're looking at is it's rumored that Jimmy Butler and Kyrie Irving have talked about playing together at some point in their careers, and we've seen in the past when you start to hear rumor of that, there's probably generally you should pay attention a little bit. Mm-hmm. We heard that with LeBron, Wade, and Chris Bosh, and then we heard that with Kevin Durant and the Warriors group and those kind of things. So it's definitely something you want to at least pay some level of attention to, even if you think, you're the most diehard Celtics fan and why would Kyrie ever leave and those kind of things. And you might be right on that, but it is something worth watching. So that's the first part of it. If either one of those teams gets Jimmy Butler, well, all of a sudden now it starts to look like, wait a minute, Kyrie's also been talked about maybe going home to the New York area to play for the Nets or the Knicks in the past too. So those are things you're going to want to pay attention to there as far as, could they connect and, link up and on one of those teams. And those are things that, Celtics fans, they're not going to want to hear it, but that's something until Kyrie Irving re-signs with the Celtics, these are the kind of things you're going to have to think about at some level and at some point. And it's kind of funny because I've had some people jump in and say, well, then they should trade him right now. Right. Well, let's not go crazy. Yeah. There's no reason to do that. And I continue to believe that the most likely thing that happens is Kyrie Irving re-signs in Boston. You always, unless the relationship has gone sour, the incumbent team has such a big advantage with how much more they can pay the player that you always want to focus on that. And then the third team in the Los Angeles Clippers, why does that matter? Kyrie's probably not going to the Clippers, right? He's not going to go play in LeBron's shadow in Los Angeles. He's often said he's an East Coast guy, not a West Coast guy. Mm-hmm. But why that matters is the Celtics have a future draft pick from the Clippers. This coming draft, the 2019 draft, it's lottery protected. If Boston doesn't get it, it rolls over to 2020. Again, lottery protected. If Boston doesn't get it in 2020, it turns into 1 second-round pick in 2022. This was all by virtue of the Jeff Green trade back in the day. Yeah, exactly. These picks moving over to Boston via the Memphis Grizzlies. So what you want to see is you really want to see the Clippers. If you're a Celtics fan, you want to root for the Clippers to be a playoff team either this season or next season. So the Celtics get a first-round pick. And there's a couple people who've been like, well, it's just going to be another late first. Well, a late first is still better than a second rounder. Yeah. And it's not going to be that late. So, and Jimmy Butler is the kind of guy who, this year might be a little tough to lift the Clippers into the playoffs. Depends on what they would give up to get him. The West is that deep and competitive. Right. But next year, if they add another free agent to Jimmy Butler, all of a sudden, you could see the Clippers, be right back in that playoff mix. And that's going to be something, again, that you're going to want to watch. And I put it in the piece on Celtics Blog today. And, hey, you get to root for old friends Doc Rivers and Avery Bradley.
Yeah, what's so bad about that? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the Clippers, again, kind of like you mentioned, Jimmy Butler might not be able to lift them into the playoffs immediately, say he were to get traded over there this year with the depth of the West. But next year, for sure, that's a team that's lacked a lot of depth at the wing spot in years past. So Jimmy Butler's really someone that they could use. And if they were to attack next summer's loaded free agency market, that could really impact that whole Western Conference shift of power. So that would be something to watch.
Absolutely, and it keeps Butler out of the Eastern Conference and another good player out West. That's just one less guy the Celtics have to go through in the East. So that's yet another reason to root for him to go to LA.
Exactly, that would be nice. Let's go Clippers. So I like that. I like that. So back to the Wolves situation, a little less salary cap focused here too. How do you see this ending? I mean, lately we've heard a lot of talk about Thibodeau basically refusing to trade him, and he's going to push this as long as he could go. And there was a report today basically saying that he would rather leave than trade away Butler for some picks and start a rebuild there. And that sounds pretty consistent with Tom Thibodeau's attitude and the way he treats his teams. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the way he coaches. But how do you see this ending, or at least playing out over the next couple weeks? Do we see Jimmy Butler in a Wolves uniform to start this season?
Yeah, I have a hard time believing we're going to see that. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's going to get better. I don't think there's some magic pill that's going to turn this around and have Butler want to stay. I just can't see that happening. He, obviously he's got issues with a lot of things in Minnesota. A lot seems to be driven by Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. Some of the young guys doesn't think they're, necessarily professional enough or where they need to be, which is, you can feel however you want to feel about that. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're Jimmy Butler, you're entitled to whatever opinion you want to have on that one. Now, the challenge for what is also built is it seems like his relationship with Tom Thibodeau, which was reportedly great in Chicago, has soured some in Minnesota. And I've got to wonder if Butler's looking at it as, hey, I can't have this guy drive me into the ground here as I'm, heading into what is likely to be the back half of his career. And, playing 38 to 40 minutes a game at this point, he's already had some health issues. He's missed time. I wonder if that's factoring in for him as well. And, once it comes out that a guy wants traded, rarely does it go back to being good. And generally, it almost always goes into the realm of that player is no longer there. So Yeah, I know Thibodeau, reportedly said he would rather leave than go, but that's kind of like, Chris, if you or I walked into our boss and said, give me a raise or I'm going to quit.
Yeah.
Well, it either comes down to, well, Barry, I'm not going to quit because I still have bills to pay, right? At the end of the day. So, yeah. So I think it's more likely that I'm going to say, all right, well, hey, it was worth a shot. So, I think it's more likely that Butler will be gone and that they'll do what they can to get the best package that allows them to stay competitive right now, while also maybe cleaning up the books in the future. If they could somehow attach Gorgie Jang to Butler going out, or Jeff Teague or somebody like that, and figure this thing out, I think that's the best Wolves fans can hope for right now.
Right, and I think a point that you made that sticks out that's pretty substantial here is that once a relationship, at least in the NBA sense, once a relationship goes this route, it rarely turns around and becomes, unsour, becomes good again. And especially with a lot of this extra stuff that came out with Andrew Wiggins' brother tweeting hallelujah, and then you've got Jimmy Butler with the Instagram video. It was very consistent with the NBA's mantra of being social media savvy and, lots of pettiness going around. So it was great for us. If you're a Timberwolves fan, kind of makes you sick to your stomach. But for us, it was great, and especially with all that extra stuff going on, I just don't really see it, turning around. And we'll have to wait and see, media days on Monday for the Wolves. So if we can somehow, some way have Jimmy Butler taking media day photos next to Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, I think the NBA internet will just explode. So,
oh my goodness, yeah, and it's so funny because a year ago, that's exactly what was happening.
Exactly.
It was like now we've got our quote unquote big three, and we're ready to go. And when you think about Wolves fans, which have they've stayed loyal and supportive of that team through a decade or more of no playoff appearances, they finally break through last year and get in on the last day of the season. And now who knows what's going to happen. They're even with Butler, is questionable. They seem to be the popular pick of they're going to fall out of the playoffs with LeBron's better and Denver is expected to be better and whatnot. But now without Jimmy Butler, I mean, the reality is, even if you get a couple good players back, the NBA's you need 4 quarters don't equal a dollar in the NBA. So stars are what win, and Jimmy Butler was depending on what you think of Karl Anthony Towns, he was the biggest star on the team. And then, of course, we all lose because we were Joakim Noah away from being back to the Timberwolves.
Could have had the Timberwolves, man. I know.
We're so close.
We're right there. We're right there. And that would have been perfect for NBA Twitter. It would have been phenomenal. But again, that's something we'll just have to see play out over the next week or so. Let's shift gears a little bit over to some salary cap news. You are, in my sense, the salary cap guru. You're the guy. If I've got salary cap questions, I'm coming to Keith. So, with the recent news of the updated salary cap projections for the coming seasons, let's just put it into some layman's terms for people like me who don't fully get the ins and outs of some of this stuff. So, the 2019-2020 season salary cap is going to be set. The projection is, according to The Athletic, that's what The Athletic first reported, is $109 million, and the luxury tax for that season will be set at $132 million. Now, if I'm correct, the salary cap for the 2018-2019 season is 101.9, correct? Something like that?
Yeah, just about. Yeah, almost 102.
Okay. And then for the following season, for 2020 and 2021, the salary cap's going to be set at around $118 million and the luxury tax of about $143. So what does this mean for off seasons going forward, for teams like the Celtics going forward? Is there any big measures occurring with this news?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty huge. The jump of $7 million from this year to next year alone is pretty big, but it's that projection has stayed true. That 109 projection is now, I want to say we are 3 rounds in of them sticking at that number.
Okay.
Generally, when the NBA is that close, it's going to come in 1 million one side or the other of that.
Got it.
Is most likely what we're going to see. So, a jump of anywhere from 6 to 8 million is pretty big. Then what that does is that allows teams that are kind of on the tipping point of max cap space or not max cap space, that can change the dynamic for them. Now, one thing that can't be forgotten is under the current CBA, which is a change to the previous, the max salary tiers are locked in to the salary cap. So meaning the lowest tier is 25% of the cap, middle tier is 30%, highest tier is 35%, which is really nice to keep it simple because it used to be a percentage of the BRI calculation, which is basketball related income. And it was really kind of confusing to get to that number. Now it's nice and clean. You plug the number in. Okay, no, my first year max salary is X. The other thing is, which is important for Celtics fans to know, is we go up by, again, next year, the salary cap jumps about $8 million or so on the luxury tax line jumps about $8 million or so. And that's really important for the Celtics because they're already over the luxury tax right now. Now they could make a tax avoidance move at some point. Thing that's important to note there is you just have to be under by the end of the season. It's not, you got to get under today. It's just, by the end of April, you have to figure out something there to make that move. So, and which is generally really the trade deadline because it gets hard to get there after that. So you're looking at that. Now, when you flip it forward 2 years from now in 2021, that going up to 118, that's about a $2 million jump, and then 143 on the tax line, another again about $2 million jump. That's again big for the Celtics because that year, what you're looking at, if you're the Boston Celtics, is you are going to have. All right, but let's take best case scenario here. You're going to have Gordon Hayward on his player option if he opts into that, which he's that's $34.2 million. Unless he comes back and is better than he ever was before, I have a hard time seeing him opting out of $34.2 million. Let's say they re-sign Kyrie. You're going to have Kyrie pushing about $36 million or so in that year. And then Al Horford, who knows what he'll be, but he could be a free agent or he could be under a new contract. And then Jaylen Brown's due for a new deal that summer. That could be the first year of an extension for him. Aaron Baines could be a free agent. So you're seeing all this stuff is piling up for the Celtics. So any jumps here help them because the Celtics, this is something we said last year when they signed Gordon Hayward. That was the last chance at cap space for a while for Boston, unless they really fall apart and lose Kyrie and lose Al Horford and all these other guys that they'd rather not lose. They're going to be a capped out team. So what you're really looking for is growth between their salaries committed on the books and the tax line, and that's what we're seeing for the Celtics. So it's a little bit of help for them. It'll get eaten up very quickly, and we'll see. I still believe in the ownership when they say that they're willing to pay the luxury tax for a winner. That does only go so far, but we'll see where that ultimately lands out. And and then it could be the year after that we could be really looking at the more punitive repeater tax kicking in, and that's when it starts to get really tricky for ownership because that starts to get very expensive for them to keep a roster together.
Right. So there you go. I mean, this salary cap news is very relevant, especially over the next couple of years to the Celtics. That 2021 year, quick question, that's Gordon Hayward is the only one with a player option as of now that year, correct? You've got a bunch of team options with Tatum and Gershon and probably Robert Williams that year as well.
Yeah, those guys, they've got a team option on the last year, Shemi's contract as well. So, and it would be Jaylen Brown, and I know we're going to talk about it a little bit in the show. We'll see where the situation goes, but Jabari Bird could be a restricted free agent that year. But, we'll see. The only guaranteed salary on the books that year, Marcus Smart at about $13.4 million after he signed his new contract this summer. So, everybody else, but, unless Jason Tatum, has a leg fall off or something, I think you can expect him to be on the books. Probably, Williams as well, and obviously, I would assume the team will be looking to get something done with Jaylen Brown. So, this roster is going to get really expensive. This is a challenge when you have. It's really fun to have these great veterans, and then have these young players who are better than you ever expected. As long as you're the fan and you're not the owner.
As long as it's not your money. It's fun, but it's pricey when you're involved. Yeah.
But again, if you're lifting the Auerbach Trophy and you're happy, then maybe you're okay. Why'd I call it the Auerbach Trophy?
Let's name it the Auerbach Trophy. That'd be way better.
Yeah. That would Larry O'Brien Trophy.
Yeah. Right, I like the Auerbach Trophy. That's better. So you briefly mentioned there Jabari Bird. Obviously, this is an ongoing situation. He, in his personal statement, came out and said that he was, taking a leave from the team to focus on, his mental situation, his legal situation, what have you. Obviously he has a lot going on following his pretty disturbing arrest that occurred over the last, week to 2 weeks. So the league is currently investigating, and obviously that's why the Celtics are holding off on their comments, whether they waive him or what have you. Is there any way going forward here? I know a lot of people have been asking this. What's a scenario where you can see the Celtics being able to void his contract? Does it have to go through the full league investigation? Give us your knowledge of that situation.
Yeah, so the important thing, well, let me start off with, and we should always say, our thoughts are with the victim,
right.
Hope, all the best for her, and all those things that goes without saying, but, in this day and age, it's always worth saying as well.
Agreed.
But what I will, say with Jabari Bird is, again, I hope he gets the help he needs and those kind of things, and that, but we'll obviously be monitoring as the legal process, runs its due course. Now, as far as his contract goes for this year, so here's what's important to understand with Jabari Bird. His contract, as of right now, today, nothing has changed. This is the same deal he signed, back a month or two ago. He is under contract for the Celtics for about $1.3 million, a little bit more than that, and that is fully guaranteed contract. So if the Celtics today, let's say none of this legal issues had happened and they decided, you know what, he can't play, and waived him, that's $1.3 million that goes on the books for the Celtics and applies towards the cap and applies towards the luxury tax. The tax is what's important here. Even if Bird's contract is completely wiped off the books, and I'll talk about the mechanics of that in a minute, there's no cap space created. The Celtics are so far over the cap right now, it does not matter. They're over $27 million, almost $28 million over the cap. So there's, you don't need to be a cap genius to know, take away 1.3 from 27. That doesn't get you cap space, right? So it is, nothing's going to happen there. What it would do is freeze up a roster spot, those kind of things. So that's the first part. Now, his next year, because he signed a 2-year contract, is on the books for the 1920 season right now at about almost $1.6 million. Now, that is fully non-guaranteed. So again, if none of the situation had happened, and the Celtics waived him today, they eat that $1.3 million this year. The next year just goes away. It's like it wasn't even there because it's fully non-guaranteed. Now, we know the situation happened. The Celtics cannot they could waive him today, and that cap hit goes on the books.
Right.
But the Celtics what they can do is let the league let this play out. Let the league complete their investigation under their new domestic violence policy that is in the new CBA, collectively bargained by the league and the Players Association. Adam Silver has the power to void a contract. Now, he can do that under that domestic violence policy. There's also a long-standing clause in the CBA, even before the domestic violence policy, that says if a player cannot render services, so basically he can't live up to his side of the contract, and it's not injury related. So if in this case that player is in jail, then what happens is that can also be cause to void a contract. Anytime a player can't live up to his side of the deal that he signed with a team, that can also be a voided contract. Voided contracts are extremely rare in the NBA. It was only changed a couple CBAs ago, even when a player died. Famously, I know a lot of bitter Celtics fans that when Reggie Lewis died, his salary cap number stayed on the books for the Celtics until the contract ran out, which, there's a whole lot of stories and shenanigans that went on there as teams were sick of losing to the Celtics and didn't want them to get any kind of relief and, said, don't take it off. But that's a different situation. So in this situation it's really going to be Adam Silver in the NBA, as the Celtics have said very clearly. They're not washing their hands of this and saying, we're out. They're basically saying, it's now in the league's hands. We're going to let them, do what they need to do. We'll support in every way possible, and then we'll see where this plays out. So this is going to be something that, unfortunately, you're going to be there Monday at Media Day.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot of questions asked of players, Brad Stevens, Danny Ainge, whoever is made available to the media. I'm assuming there's going to be questions about Jabari Bird asked. They will have coached everyone there to probably give a very similar answer to, this is now an NBA and a legal matter. I'm not going to comment, something along those lines. But the tricky part is those questions are going to be asked to every single guy who comes up there and stands in front of a microphone. They're going to be asked that question, and that's going to get really tough for the players to hear this. And then every day from there on out, right, there'll be some level of media access. Yeah. It's just going to hang there, but it's unfortunately, this is not going to be resolved quickly. It's probably going to take a little bit before this goes, because we all know the legal process is not going to be quick either. And the Celtics and the NBA are going to act in conjunction with that legal process as well.
Right, and I mean, it's probably a good thing that they're taking their time and deliberately going through this, but again, you tweeted it the other day, and you just mentioned it. It's going to hang out there for quite a long time, and whether we like it or not, it's going to be mentioned quite a bit over the next month to however long this goes on. But Keith, thank you for explaining that. Thank you for coming on the show. You can follow Keith at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter. He's a phenomenal follow. You can get him at RealGM and Celtics blog. Thanks a lot for coming on, man. I'm sure we'll be talking with you soon over the next month or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's Thursday night when we're recording this, and we're a little over a week out from the first preseason game. So that's right. We're there, man. I can't wait. I'm excited. Thanks for having me on the show, and let's look forward to a good season, good NBA season coming, and hopefully a successful one for the Celtics.
That's right. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, great stuff there, as always, from Keith Smith. You can follow him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. You get him at RealGM and Celtics blog. Once again, he always brings it, so we'll have him on in the coming months as the season gets going here. Now, Nick, we're recording on Friday. We are a week away from Celtics basketball. A week from today, the Celtics play at the Dean Smith Center in North Carolina. They'll play the Hornets to open up their preseason slate. We have just a couple days away. On Monday, we'll be at Media Day, so you can follow Celtics CLNS and at Celtics blog on Twitter for all of that coverage. Anything you're looking for in particular going into Media Day on Monday?
Oh, man. Well, as much as I love Celtics events, I'm not looking forward to the location because it was brutal last year.
Yeah,
it was brutal last year, and I suspect it will be again. But
yeah, it's tight. It's tight.
Yeah, I mean, Media Day is always fun, right? Everybody's kind of loosey goosey. Last year was super interesting because Kyrie and LeBron were kind of shouting at each other from 4 states away on the microphone. Like there was just some intriguing sub stories. This year, I think it's just going to be awesome to see Gordon, Kyrie, like this whole team together. And it's always just such a great light atmosphere at Media Day. The Celtics do a good job of putting on that event.
Yeah, the Celtics really do a great job. And like you said, Media Day is a fun time. Every team in the league is, has high expectations. They have no losses. Everyone's 0-0. They're going into the year healthy. So it's exciting. And again, there's plenty of storylines going into the season with Hayward and Irving returning healthy. This is a deep, scary roster, and it should be a light mood. And then training camp following day on Tuesday begins, Wednesday, and then the team will travel down to North Carolina. It is a weird thing. It's kind of a front-loaded preseason schedule, and then I think they return to Boston and play Charlotte early in the following week. But hey, man, we made it. We're through the off season. Celtics basketball is back, and we're right there. So you can follow everything at Celtics blog, at Chris Grenham for myself on Twitter. Nick, you want to
at Nick _. Wait a minute. What is my Twitter handle?
I just
at CLNS _ Nick.
There you go. I couldn't think of it either. So there you go. Follow us on Twitter, obviously at CLNS Media, Celtics CLNS, at Celtics blog. We'll have you covered at Media Day on Monday, following with training camp the following 2 days and preseason underway. So Nick, I will talk to you this weekend and next week.
Yeah, man. Can't wait. Thanks, Chris.